The Last Goodbye. A Story of Loss and Brotherhood Chapter 1. The news: Tommy Reaper Martinez had received the call at 3 a.m., the kind of call that makes your blood run cold, that stops time itself. Sarah was gone, his little sister. The one person in this world who'd never given up on him, who'd looked past the leather and the ink and the reputation, had been killed by a drunk driver on Highway 40. Just like that. One moment she was driving home from her late shift at the diner, and the next, she was gone forever. Now, 6 days later, he found himself standing in the driveway of her modest home on Maple Street, surrounded by his brothers from the Devil's Disciples Motorcycle Club. The rumble of their Harleys had announced their arrival like thunder, shaking the windows of the quiet neighborhood. But Tommy barely heard it. All he could hear was the echo of that phone call, the detective's somber voice, the sound of his own heart breaking. The funeral had been that morning. Sarah had been laid to rest in the Pine Grove Cemetery, where their mother had been buried 15 years ago. Tommy had stood there in his club vest, tears streaming down his tattooed face, while his brothers formed a wall of leather and chrome around him. They'd revved their engines in tribute, a final salute to a woman who had baked them cookies, patched their wounds, and never judged them for the lives they'd chosen. But now came the hardest part, the part Tommy had been dreading more than anything. Chapter 2. The children's 6-year-old Marcus stood on the driveway, clutching his worn teddy bear against his red hoodie. His eyes were swollen from crying, dark circles underneath making him look far older than his years. Beside him, 4-year-old Emma clung to her grandmother's cardigan, her blonde pigtails slightly crooked from the morning's rushed preparation. Both children had been at their grandmother's house when the accident happened. Both had lost their mother in an instant. Tommy knelt down slowly, his knees creaking, his heavily tattooed arms visible in the afternoon sun. He'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his head during the long ride over. What do you say to children who've just lost everything? How do you explain that their mother, who kissed them goodnight just 2 days ago, would never kiss them again? "Hey, little man," Tommy said softly to Marcus, his voice rough with emotion. "Hey, Emma Bear." Marcus's lower lip trembled. "Uncle Tommy, when is Mommy coming home?" The question hit Tommy like a freight train. He glanced up at his brothers standing behind him, Chains, Smokey, Bear, and Diesel, men who'd faced down rival gangs, survived prison time, and weathered every storm life had thrown at them. Every single one of them had tears in their eyes. Tommy took a deep breath. "Buddy, your mom, she's not coming home. Remember what Grandma told you. Your mom's in heaven now with Grandma Rose. She's watching over you both." Emma started to cry, burying her face in her grandmother's leg. "I want Mommy." Chapter 3. The Weight of Responsibility. Barbara Mitchell, the children's 72-year-old grandmother, stood on the porch, looking 10 years older than she had at the funeral. Her daughter was gone, her beautiful, strong, stubborn daughter who'd raised these babies on her own after their father had walked out. And now Barbara was facing an impossible situation. She'd raised Sarah by herself after her husband died. She'd worked 2 jobs, sacrificed everything, and done her best. But she was old now, tired. Her arthritis made it hard to keep up with one energetic child, let alone 2 grieving ones who would need everything she could give and more. Tommy saw it in her eyes as he stood up. The fear, the exhaustion, the overwhelming weight of responsibility that had suddenly crashed down on her shoulders. "Tommy," Barbara said quietly, "can we talk inside?" In Sarah's small living room, surrounded by family photos and the lingering scent of her perfume, Barbara laid it all out. Her fixed income, her health problems, her small apartment that couldn't accommodate 2 growing children, the social worker who'd already called about foster care options. "No," Tommy said immediately, his voice hard. "No foster care. These are Sarah's kids, their family." "Tommy, I know you mean well, but..." Barbara gestured at his vest, his patches, the life he represented. "You're not exactly stable," Tommy finished bitterly. "Responsible? Fit to raise kids?" Barbara's eyes softened. "You know Sarah loved you. She always believed in you. But honey, you live at the clubhouse, you're on the road half the time. The courts would never, then I'll change." The words came out before Tommy even knew he was saying them. "I'll get a real place, a legitimate job. Whatever it takes." "Sarah trusted me with them, Barbara. Every time she needed someone, she called me. I was the one who taught Marcus to ride his bike. I was the one who sat up with Emma when she had nightmares. I can do this." Chapter 4. The Brotherhood weighs in outside. The brothers had gathered around the bikes, giving Tommy space but staying close. When he emerged from the house 20 minutes later, his face was set with determination. Chains, the club president, stepped forward. He was a mountain of a man, 6'4", with a gray beard and scars that told a lifetime of stories. "What's the word, brother?" "I'm taking them," Tommy said. "The kids, I'm going to raise them Silence fell over the group. Then Smokey, the club's sergeant-at-arms, let out a low whistle. "Brother, you know what you're signing up for. This ain't like babysitting for a weekend." "I know exactly what I'm signing up for," Tommy shot back. "Sarah raised those kids alone. If she could do it working double shifts at a diner, I can figure it out." Bear, the club's treasurer, stepped closer. "What about the life? The club? You can't be hauling kids to runs and charter meetings." Tommy's jaw tightened. "Then I'll step back. I'll stay local. Do whatever I have to do." Diesel, the youngest of the group at 35, shook his head. "Court's never gonna let a biker raise 2 kids, man. You know how they are. They see the vest, they see the record, and that's all she wrote." "He's right," Chains said heavily. "Systems rigged against guys like us. Doesn't matter what kind of man you are, what kind of uncle you've been. All they see is the 1% patch." Tommy felt his chest tightening with frustration and grief. "So what? I'm supposed to just let them go into foster care? Get split up?" Sarah would die all over again if she knew. His voice broke. Chains put a heavy hand on Tommy's shoulder. "Listen to me, brother. We're with you. All of us. If you're serious about this, we'll help make it happen. We'll clean you up for court, get character witnesses, whatever you need. But you gotta be all in. This means changing everything." Chapter 5. The decision that night. Tommy sat alone in the clubhouse bar long after everyone else had gone to bed. In front of him sat a half-empty bottle of whiskey and a worn photograph. It showed Sarah at 16, skinny and defiant, standing next to 20-year-old Tommy and his first bike. She'd just been kicked out by their foster parents, the 3rd home in 2 years. Tommy had already been living rough, sleeping at the clubhouse, running errands for the club. When he found out Sarah had nowhere to go, he'd taken her in, lied about his age, rented a tiny apartment, worked 3 jobs to keep them both fed. Sarah had been his responsibility then, too, and he'd failed her. He'd gotten arrested, done time, and by the time he got out, she'd already learned to survive on her own. She'd finished school, had Marcus, was building a life, and Tommy had watched from the outside, always the unreliable brother, always the cautionary tale. But she'd never shut him out, never stopped calling when she needed help with the kids, never stopped inviting him to birthday parties and school plays even, when other parents whispered and pulled their children away. "I'm sorry, sis," Tommy whispered to the empty room. "I should have been there. Should have driven you home that night, should have protected you." But Sarah was gone, and all Tommy could do now was protect what she'd left behind. Chapter 6. The fight begins the next morning. Tommy met with a lawyer named Janet Rodriguez, recommended by Chains's old lady. She was a tough woman in her 50s who'd built a career defending guys like them. She didn't sugarcoat it. "Your criminal record is going to be a problem. The assault charge from 10 years ago, the drug possession, the association with an outlaw motorcycle club, the court will use all of it against you." "I did my time," Tommy said. "Been clean for 8 years. Haven't been in trouble since." "That's good. We'll need character witnesses, employer references, proof of stable housing and income. And Tommy," she looked at him seriously, "you need to understand what you're up against. The state will argue that those children need stability, structure, a normal life. They'll say you can't provide that. Then I'll prove them wrong." Over the following weeks, Tommy transformed his life. He got a job at Mike's Auto Body, legitimate work, steady hours. He rented a 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood, far from the clubhouse. He attended parenting classes at the community center, sitting in a room full of young couples while he took notes on child development and healthy discipline. His brothers helped where they could. Bear co-signed his lease. Chains wrote a character reference that somehow made running an outlaw motorcycle club sound like community leadership. Diesel's girlfriend, a teacher, gave Tommy crash courses in homework help and bedtime routines, but the hardest part was facing the social worker assigned to the case. Linda Chen was a professional skeptic who'd seen every con and heard every promise from every unfit guardian trying to keep kids out of the system. "Mr. Martinez, I see you've made changes," she said during her home visit, clipboard in hand. "But children need consistency. What happens when club business calls, when your brothers need you?" "The kids come first," Tommy said firmly. "Always. And your history of violence. That was a bar fight a decade ago. I'm not that person anymore." Linda made notes, her expression unreadable. "The children have been through trauma. They'll need therapy, support, patience. Can you provide that?" Tommy thought of Marcus, who'd stopped speaking after the funeral, of Emma, who screamed herself awake every night. "I'll do whatever they need. I'll get them help. Be there for them. I love those kids, Miss Chen. They're all I have left of my sister." Chapter 7. The memories Marcus and Emma had been staying with their grandmother, but Barbara brought them over for visits each time Tommy saw the weight of grief pressing down on them. Marcus moved like a ghost through the house, mechanically eating food, staring at walls. Emma asked for her mother a dozen times a day, unable to understand why she wasn't coming back. Tommy took them to the park one Saturday, pushing Emma on the swings while Marcus sat in the sand unmoving. An old woman on a nearby bench smiled at them. Beautiful children. They're lucky to have such a devoted father. I'm their uncle, Tommy said quietly. Well, they're lucky to have you, whatever you are to them. But Tommy didn't feel like they were lucky. Lucky kids had mothers who came home at night. Lucky kids didn't learn about loss before they learned to read. That night, as he drove them back to Barbara's, Emma spoke up from her car seat. Uncle Tommy, are you going to leave too? The question gutted him. No, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? He met her eyes in the rearview mirror. I promise. Chapter 8. Court day. The custody hearing was scheduled for a cold Tuesday in November. 4 months after Sarah's death, Tommy wore his only suit borrowed from Chains and slightly too big, and scrubbed his tattoos until his skin was raw, trying to make the images less visible. The courtroom was intimidating. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the judge's bench looming above like an altar. Barbara sat in the gallery, her hands clasped in prayer. The brothers had wanted to come, but Janet advised against it. A courtroom full of bikers won't help your case, she'd said gently. The state's attorney painted Tommy as a dangerous criminal playing at redemption. She cited statistics about children raised in unstable environments, about the correlation between criminal parents and criminal children. She questioned his employment, his housing, his associations. Then Janet stood up and told a different story. She presented letters from Tommy's employer, praising his reliability and work ethic. She called Barbara to the stand, who testified through tears about how Tommy had always been there for Sarah and the children. She showed the judge photos, Tommy teaching Marcus to ride a bike, Tommy holding newborn Emma at the hospital, Tommy at every birthday party and school event, Your Honor. Janet said in closing, Tommy Martinez isn't perfect, he's made mistakes, but he's also the person Sarah trusted most in this world. He's the person these children know and love. He's family, and he's spent the last 4 months proving he can provide exactly what these children need: stability, love, and a connection to their mother's memory. The state attorney countered with concerns about Tommy's background and lifestyle. The judge asked Tommy to stand. Mr. Martinez, why should I place these children in your care? Tommy's mouth went dry. All the speeches he'd rehearsed vanished. All he had left was the truth. Your Honor, I can't promise I'll be perfect. I can't promise I'll always know the right thing to do. But I can promise that I'll love those kids with everything I have. I'll protect them. I'll show up for them. I'll be what Sarah would want me to be. His voice cracked. My sister believed in me when nobody else did. She saw past everything I'd been and believed in who I could become. I want to honor that. I want to honor her by raising her children the way she would want, with love, with safety, with family. Please, Your Honor, let me try. Chapter 9. The verdict. The judge took a week to make her decision. 7 days of Tommy barely sleeping, barely eating, going through the motions at work while his mind spun in circles. His brothers called constantly, checking in, offering support, promising that whatever happened, they'd figure it out. On the 8th day, Janet called. The judge wants to see you in chambers. Bring the children. Tommy's hands shook as he drove to the courthouse. Barbara sat in the passenger seat with Marcus and Emma in the back. Nobody spoke. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on all of them. In the judge's chambers, Judge Patricia Morrison looked at the files before her, then at the children, then at Tommy. Mr. Martinez, I've reviewed your case extensively. I've considered the state's concerns and your attorney's arguments. I've looked at your history and your recent efforts to build a stable life. Tommy held his breath. I'm going to grant you temporary custody with conditions. You'll undergo regular home visits. The children will receive counseling. You'll attend parenting support groups, and in 6 months, we'll reconvene to assess the situation. If you've demonstrated consistent, appropriate care, I'll make the custody permanent. Relief flooded through Tommy so powerfully he nearly collapsed. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Mr. Martinez. This is about what's best for Marcus and Emma. Prove to me that's you. Chapter 10. Building a life. The first night Marcus and Emma stayed at Tommy's house officially was chaos. Emma cried for 2 hours straight, wanting her grandmother, wanting her mother, wanting anything familiar. Marcus refused to eat, refused to speak, just sat on the couch staring at nothing. Tommy felt panic rising in his chest. What had he done? How could he possibly fill the hole their mother had left? But then he remembered something Sarah used to say. You just show up, Tommy. That's all anyone can do. You just keep showing up. So he showed up. Every morning he made breakfast. Every day he went to work and came straight home. Every evening he helped with homework, made dinner, ran baths. Every night he read bedtime stories and checked for monsters under the bed and promised them they were safe. The brothers showed up too, in their own way. Chains came by once a week with groceries, never saying much, just making sure they had what they needed. Bear taught Marcus basic math using playing cards and motorcycle parts. Diesel's girlfriend, Maria, became Tommy's lifeline, teaching him how to braid Emma's hair and what questions to ask at parent-teacher conferences. Slowly, painfully, they built a routine. Marcus started speaking again, just a few words at first, then sentences. Then finally, 3 months in, a laugh when Tommy told a stupid joke. Emma's nightmares became less frequent. She started calling Tommy's house home. They went to therapy, all three of them. Dr. Sarah Kim, a trauma specialist, helped the children process their grief. She helped Tommy understand that he couldn't replace their mother, couldn't fill that void, but he could give them something new. Safety, consistency, love. Chapter 11. The 6-month review. The 6-month review came in May, when the tulips in Tommy's front yard were blooming. Linda Chen, the social worker, had been making regular visits, her skepticism slowly giving way to something like respect. She'd seen Tommy at his worst, exhausted, frustrated, sometimes tearful, but she'd never seen him give up. In court, she gave her report. Your Honor, when I first met Mr. Martinez, I had serious concerns about his ability to parent. Those concerns have been largely alleviated. The children are thriving. Marcus's grades have improved. Emma is enrolled in preschool and doing well. The home is stable, clean, and safe. Mr. Martinez has attended every therapy session, every parent-teacher conference, every doctor's appointment. He's built a support system and a life that centers on these children's needs. The state's attorney asked about Tommy's continued association with the motorcycle club. Linda nodded. Mr. Martinez still maintains friendships with club members, but he's no longer active in club activities. His focus is entirely on the children. Judge Morrison looked at Tommy. Mr. Martinez, you've come a long way. I'm impressed by your commitment and transformation. I'm prepared to grant permanent custody, with continued therapy and support services. These children are yours. Tommy couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears streaming down his face. Behind him, Barbara was sobbing, and beside him, Marcus and Emma held his hands, finally understanding that this was forever. Chapter 12. Moving forward, life didn't become perfect after that. There were still hard days, still moments when Tommy felt overwhelmed and out of his depth. Marcus struggled with anger sometimes, lashing out at the unfairness of losing his mother. Emma had setbacks, weeks where the nightmares came back. But there were good days too. The first time Marcus called him Dad by accident, then by choice. The morning Emma made him a Father's Day card covered in crayon hearts. The evening they cooked Sarah's recipe for spaghetti together, sharing stories about her, keeping her memory alive. Tommy cut back his hours at the shop and went back to school, taking night classes in business management. He wanted to open his own place someday, give the kids something stable to inherit. The brothers adjusted, understanding that Tommy's life had taken a different path. They still rode together sometimes, on rare Saturdays when Maria could watch the kids, but the club was no longer his primary family. His primary family was a 6-year-old who liked dinosaurs and a 4-year-old who insisted on wearing tutus to the grocery store. His primary family was school lunches and homework battles and bedtime stories. His primary family was the sound of children's laughter in a house that had once been silent. Epilogue. 3 years later, on a Sunday afternoon in late summer, Tommy stood in his backyard watching Marcus play catch with chains while Emma showed off her cartwheel to anyone who would watch. The brothers were there for a barbecue, the first club gathering at Tommy's place in months. Barbara sat in a lawn chair, watching her grandchildren with a peaceful smile. She'd been diagnosed with early-stage dementia 6 months ago, but on good days like this, she was present and whole. "You did it, Mijo," she said as Tommy handed her a lemonade. Sarah would be so proud. Tommy watched the kids, thinking about that day 3 years ago when he'd knelt in a driveway and made an impossible promise. So much had changed. The scared, silent children were now noisy, messy, wonderful kids who called him Dad and fought over the remote and filled his life with purpose. "I hope so," he said quietly. "God, I hope so." That night, after the guests had left and the kids were in bed, Tommy sat on Emma's floor while she slept, her small hand wrapped around his finger. In the next room, Marcus was reading under the covers with a flashlight, thinking Tommy didn't know. This was his life now, not the one he'd planned, not the one he'd expected, but the one Sarah had trusted him with, The one, built on loss and love and the daily choice to show up. Tommy thought about the photograph he kept on his dresser, Sarah with the kids, taken 6 months before she died. In it, she was laughing, Marcus on her shoulders, Emma in her arms, happy, whole, unaware that time was running out. "I've got them, sis," Tommy whispered into the darkness. "I've got them, and I'm never letting go." Outside, the sound of motorcycles faded into the distance as his brothers headed home. But Tommy stayed where he was, watching his daughter sleep, listening to his son turn pages. In the next room, living a life he'd never imagined but wouldn't trade for anything. Because this was what family meant. Not leather and chrome, not blood and brotherhood, but this. Showing up every day for the people who needed you. This was the ride that mattered most, the hardest one he'd ever taken, and the only one that truly counted. And somewhere, Tommy believed, Sarah was watching, smiling, believing in him still.